At 7:52 p.m., Dale Mercer slammed a returned dinner plate onto the stainless pass and pointed at Elena Marlowe. One more mistake before 9:40, and you're off the floor. The plate rattled, onions hissed on the grill, and cold rain striped the windows beneath the red open sign. Elena caught the threat by reading his mouth. She felt the vibration through the counter, saw 3 customers in booth 9 turn toward her, and smelled coffee burning in a pot no one had replaced. She pointed toward the kitchen window, where a metal confirmation rail should have been mounted. Dale shook his head. No excuses. 42 customers filled Maple Junction Diner, 14 booths, and 8 counter stools, and Elena was covering nearly all of them because one server had been sent home and the busser had not been replaced. At 9:40 p.m., Hannah Pike from Allegheny Freight Services would leave with a decision about a 6-month meal contract for the company's night drivers. Dale had repeated the deadline all week. Now every delay had become Elena's delay. Every shouted change was something she was expected to hear, and every impatient glance seemed to land on her pale blue uniform. Near the rear wall, 6 members of the Copper Line Riders sat in a long booth, their wet jackets dark with rain. Their road captain, Raymond Ledger Cole, had not called for service. At 57, he carried himself like a man who had spent years watching systems fail one small handoff at a time. Elena delivered 3 plates, corrected a handwritten substitution, and turned just as Marty Keene called an order while facing the grill. She did not hear him. Dale snapped his fingers beside her face. Elena stepped back and signed, "Don't do that." Dale rolled his eyes toward the room. "See what I'm dealing with." A few customers looked away. Others watched Elena as though she had caused the confusion. Beneath the prep counter, the corner of a laminated board showed through the shadow. She had designed it. Table numbers, order change symbols, and color-coded confirmation for the whole shift. Tonight, it lay face down, its missing rail leaving 3 clean screw holes along one edge. Elena reached toward it, but Dale moved his shoe over the corner and pushed it farther under the counter. Then he leaned close enough for her to read him clearly. "Before 9:40, we decide whether you still work peak hours." Raymond saw Elena's eyes move to the hidden board. He saw Dale follow her gaze. He saw the board disappear beneath the counter. Around them, silverware scraped, a child began to cry, and the kitchen bell flashed again without any visual confirmation reaching Elena. Why would a manager hide the one tool his busiest server kept trying to use? Raymond waited until Elena reached the rider's booth before he spoke. He turned his shoulders so she could see his face and pointed to the printed menu rather than competing with the noise. The other riders followed his lead. Each wrote substitutions on the paper placemat, then held the note still until Elena nodded. No one waved from behind her. No one snapped fingers. 6 drinks arrived correctly, followed by 6 orders written in Elena's clear block letters. From the counter, Dale watched the exchange with the impatience of a man who believed courtesy itself was slowing business. When a customer at stool 5 asked for coffee while facing the window, Elena passed without noticing. Dale tapped his own ear, pointed at her, and told Hannah Pike, "That is the problem. She misses what everyone else catches." Hannah looked uncomfortable, but the claim matched what she had just seen. She did not know that the diner normally used a small refill marker at the counter, or that Dale had removed it with the board. At booth 4, fries arrived without gravy. At booth 11, a burger came with cheese despite a written note. Each time, Elena checked the ticket, returned to the kitchen, and found her instructions correct. Yet Dale always explained first. "She loses the thread when we get busy." The room hurt him. The kitchen hurt him. Customers who had never met Elena began watching her through his version of events. A deaf waitress in a noisy diner seemed, to them, like the obvious weak link. Elena kept moving. She knew which coffee pot turned bitter after 8, which booth leaned toward the wall, and which regular wanted toast cut before it reached the table. She had worked there for almost 3 years. None of that experience was visible when the person with authority defined every failure before she could answer. Raymond noticed something else. Elena never sent a ticket through without pointing to the written change. The mistakes appeared only after the paper crossed the pass. He also noticed that the worst delays clustered around booth 9, where a support column blocked Elena's view of the kitchen window. When Dale approached the riders, Raymond asked, "Does the board under the counter belong to the floor process?" Dale gave a short laugh. "It's her memory board. We stopped using it because it confused everybody." Elena saw the sentence on his lips from across the aisle. Her expression tightened, but the past light flashed and she turned back to work. Raymond looked at the 6 correct drinks in front of him, then at the board Dale had hidden. "Her written orders seem clear," he said. "The errors begin after she hands them over." Dale's smile disappeared. If the board was only a personal crutch, why did he refuse to let anyone examine it? By 8:31, the line at the entrance reached the glass pie case. Dale stopped seating customers for 4 minutes, then announced that service had slowed because Elena could not keep pace. He moved Hannah Pike's contract folder closer to the register and reminded her that Allegheny Freight needed reliable execution, not special arrangements. Hannah checked her watch. The 9:40 deadline remained fixed. Her recommendation had to be submitted before she left. Elena was trapped at booth 7, separating 2 checks that Dale had combined to the register. She could see him speaking about her, but could not leave the customers to challenge him. Dale began recording returned dishes on a yellow incident pad. Each time a plate came back, he wrote a time, circled Elena's initials, and slid the page beneath the register. The paperwork gave his explanation weight. Raymond watched him mark 8:29 for a plate returned after the wall clock had passed 8:34. He checked his square steel watch, then wrote the actual time on the edge of his placemat. 5 minutes seemed minor until repeated errors began forming an official sequence. Raymond had spent 28 years training freight crews, including deaf drivers and loading teams that relied on visual confirmation. He knew that a false timeline could make the wrong person look responsible. He did not stand over Dale or demand the pad. He asked only, "Who confirms an order change after Elena gives it to the kitchen?" Dale replied, "The cooks call it out." "And when she cannot see them?" Raymond asked. Dale glanced toward the support column beside booth 9. "Then she needs to pay attention." The nearest tables grew quieter. Raymond looked at the column, the missing rail, and the face-down board. Attention cannot receive a message that never reaches its destination. Dale stepped closer, but Raymond remained seated with both hands visible around his coffee cup. "You here to eat or run my diner?" Dale asked. "To eat," Raymond said, "and to understand why the tickets are right while the plates are wrong." At the pass, Marty called another change while looking down at the grill. Elena did not turn. Dale pushed a hot plate into her path, and she caught it with a towel before it tipped. A customer muttered that she should not be working alone. Elena read sympathy on one face and blame on another. Neither helped her finish the shift. Beneath the counter, the board had shifted. Raymond could now see a clean rectangle in the grease haze where the rail had recently covered the laminate. Dale followed his gaze, tore another incident page free, and mouthed to Elena, "You're done before Pike leaves." He had turned the contract deadline into a personal threat without consulting Hannah or the owner. The pressure was no longer only the dinner rush. Dale was trying to complete a record before anyone could inspect the process that had been taken away. What did he need on paper before 9:40? At 8:39, 2 untouched plates came back from booth 12. Dale lifted the tray high enough for Hannah to see and said, "This is exactly why the trial ended." Then he reached beneath the prep counter, pulled out the laminated board, and set it upright against the pass. The shift relay board was divided into table boxes, each with simple symbols for drinks, entrees, changes, and ready orders. 3 positions along the right edge had once held red, yellow, and green tabs, but the metal rail was gone. Dale tapped the symbols as though presenting something childish. "She needs pictures. Everyone else needs speed." The board looked dense from across the room, and several customers accepted his description before anyone examined it. Hannah left her stool and moved closer. "Was this approved?" she asked. "Temporarily," Dale said. "It slowed the kitchen, so I removed it." Elena arrived carrying the 2 original tickets. One said no onions. The other said dressing on the side. Both were correct. Dale placed his palm over them and kept the attention on the board. The problem is dependency. A rush cannot stop because one employee needs a separate system. Raymond waited until the aisle cleared before approaching. He stopped several feet from Dale and opened one hand toward the board. "May I look?" Hannah answered before Dale could refuse. "Let him." Raymond did not touch the symbols. He studied the empty edge. 3 screw holes remained bright against the dull laminate, and a narrow strip beside them was cleaner than the rest of the board. "When did you remove the rail?" he asked. Dale said the trial had ended weeks earlier. Raymond pointed without touching. "These holes were covered recently." Dale blamed kitchen cleaning. Raymond turned the board over. A sheet of closing tasks had been taped across most of the back, but beneath its lower edge he could read a printed line, 12-shift pilot. 2 figures remained uncovered, 19 corrections before / 4 corrections after. Initials followed, including EM and a second mark Elena recognized as the owner's. Dale immediately turned the board front side again. Old numbers, different conditions. To most of the room, the board still appeared to support him. It was unusual, removed from the wall, and associated with the employee currently being blamed. But Raymond had seen the contradiction. A personal memory aid would not track corrections across 12 full shifts. A failed trial would not show errors falling from 19 to 4. Elena reached toward the board, then stopped. Dale was still her manager. Hannah was still evaluating the diner, and 32 customers still needed checks or refills. Raymond looked at the taped sheet on the back. One corner had been lifted and pressed down again, leaving a fresh crease in the adhesive. The board was not merely being misunderstood. Someone had arranged how it would be seen. What information had Dale covered before bringing it out as proof against Elena? Elena waited until Dale turned toward the register, then peeled back the corner of the closing sheet. Beneath, it was a short memo signed by Ruth Bell, the diner's owner. Pilot accepted for continued use pending permanent mounting hardware. Hannah read the sentence twice. Continued use? She asked. Dale stopped moving. The question in the diner changed at once. It was no longer whether Elena could work fast enough. It was why an accepted process had been dismantled on the busiest night of the month. Dale recovered by pointing out that the memo was provisional. Ruth had not written the board into the permanent manual, and he still held authority over the evening shift. Those claims were technically possible. They did not explain the missing rail, the covered results, or the timing. Raymond faced Elena so she could read him. Was the board made only for you? She took a pen from her apron and wrote on a guest check. For every handoff. Kitchen confirms receipt. Server confirms ready. No order changes by assumption. Then she added, use 12 shifts. Removed before dinner today. Hannah held the note beside the 19 to 4 result. Dale said Elena was upset and misremembering. Raymond looked toward the yellow incident pad under the register. He did not take it. He asked Hannah to note only what was visible on the top page. In the corrective action box, Dale had already written remove from peak shifts. The time beside the recommendation was 8:22 before most of the plates now being used to justify it had been returned. The disorder was not simply exposing a weakness. It was being shaped into a record. Dale had cut the floor staff, removed the board, covered its results, and begun writing Elena's consequence before the rush had produced enough evidence to support it. Still, the full case was not complete. The owner was unavailable. The rail had not been found. Marty and Lana had said nothing. And Elena could not stop serving long enough to reconstruct the entire evening. At 8:47, she looked at the clock and understood that merely surviving the shift would no longer protect her. If Dale's report stood, she would lose peak hours the next morning. The system she had built would be remembered as the cause of a failure created by its removal. Raymond slid the board toward Elena instead of holding it himself. You design the process, he said slowly. You decide whether it can be shown. Elena looked at the waiting tables, the correct tickets, and the clock. Then she wrote one more sentence. Let me run 6 orders with visible confirmation. Dale folded his arms. Not in my kitchen. Hannah glanced between them. Then the decision at 9:40 will be based on what I can verify before I leave. The goal had changed. Elena no longer needed someone to believe her explanation. She needed a fair way to demonstrate the missing process while the diner was still operating. Could she do that without giving Dale another reason to call the system unauthorized? Raymond returned to the writer's booth and asked for 6 pens and the blank backs of 6 paper placemats. Write only what you personally see, he told the others. No one stood in a line. No one surrounded Dale. 2 writers noted the time each ticket left Elena's hand. One watched the pass from his seat. Another marked whether a return plate matched the instruction written on its ticket. Their notes were not presented as authority. They were simply a way to preserve a sequence that was disappearing into noise. Hannah agreed to observe a 6-order demonstration if Elena could do it without changing kitchen equipment. Elena solved that problem herself. She placed the shift relay board on the customer side of the pass, where it could serve as a visible log rather than a kitchen installation. From the pie order basket, she took 6 wooden clothespins. Red, yellow, and green sugar packets became temporary markers. Received, cooking, ready. Raymond asked Dale before touching anything behind counter. Dale refused permission, so Raymond stayed in the dining area and let Elena arrange every piece. She wrote 5 simple symbols on a guest check and showed them to Marty and Lana. Received, change, cooking, ready, help. Lana copied the symbols on a masking tape above her station. Marty hesitated, then nodded. The demonstration began with booth 3. Elena handed over the written ticket. Lana raised one finger when she received it, moved the yellow packet when cooking began, and placed green beneath the table number when the plate was ready. Booth 9 remained difficult because the support column blocked the board from Elena's usual route. She moved a chrome napkin holder 6 inches along the counter until its polished side reflected the green marker. The adjustment cost nothing and required no special device. Within 11 minutes, 7 orders moved through the pass without a correction. The diner did not become silent. Plates still struck the counter, coffee still hissed, and customers still spoke over one another. What changed was that each message received an answer. Raymond compared the writer's observations with the printed times already visible on the guest checks. The sequence held. Marty quietly told him that the missing metal rail had been on Dale's office desk before the shift. Raymond did not announce it. He asked Marty whether he would say the same thing directly to Elena and Hannah, if necessary. Marty looked ashamed, then nodded. At 9:05, Dale emerged from the office holding a policy sheet. "Unauthorized modifications must stop," he said. His argument had force. A manager could not allow customers to invent kitchen procedure during a rush. Elena removed the clothespins at once. Dale then placed Saturday's schedule on the counter. Her name had been crossed out. The first material loss had already begun, and 35 minutes remained before Hannah's deadline. Could a process that worked in plain sight still be dismissed because the person who removed it controlled the paperwork? At 9:12, Dale laid the policy sheet beside the shift relay board and addressed Hannah with the calmest voice he had used all evening. He said a freight contract required repeatable controls, not a procedure that depended on one server, a group of customers, and sugar packets. He said the owner's memo approved a pilot, not permanent installation. He said food service rules did not permit unapproved objects around the pass. Each point sounded reasonable when separated from the night that had produced it. Hannah closed her folder halfway. "I need a system the diner itself will maintain after everyone in that booth leaves," she said. Elena understood. Raymond's riders could record a shift, but they could not become part of the restaurant's daily operation. Elena looked at the crossed-out Saturday schedule and began untying her apron. Leaving felt less humiliating than standing beside a process Dale would always be free to remove. Raymond did not tell her to stay. He turned the board over and placed the owner's memo where she could see it. Then he pointed to the bright screw holes. The board's meaning had changed again. It was no longer merely proof that Elena's method reduced corrections. It was physical evidence that an accepted shared process had been taken apart and then described as her private weakness. "The temporary markers are not the issue," Raymond said. "The original hardware is." Dale replied that the rail had been removed for evaluation and that management had the right to evaluate it. Raymond nodded. "Then restore it for the remaining orders. If the approved system fails, the result supports you. If it works, correct the schedule and the record." The offer gave Dale a way to repair the harm without being publicly defeated. He needed only to retrieve the rail, allow Elena to run the process, and accept the measurable outcome. Dale looked toward his office. For a moment, it seemed he might take the path. Then he said, "I will not let a motorcycle club dictate staffing." Raymond remained several feet away, his hands resting loosely at his sides. "We are not setting the staff. We are asking the removed process to be tested before one person is punished for its absence." Marty stood at the pass, holding a plate for booth 2. Instead of calling Elena's name while facing away, he stepped in her sight line, raised 2 fingers, and waited until she answered. It was the smallest correction anyone had made all evening, yet it changed the room. A cook who had followed Dale's method was now acknowledging that a message was incomplete until Elena received it. She stopped untying her apron. Hannah reopened the folder, though she did not sign anything. The board, the schedule, and the unfinished orders remained on the counter. Dale still had the authority to refuse, and his explanation still sounded official. But he had also been given a concrete opportunity to restore what he had removed. If he rejected it, what would the remaining minutes reveal about the decision he claimed was merely operational? At 9:18, Elena retied her apron and cleared one section of the counter. Raymond did not conduct a hearing. He asked Hannah to compare 3 things already produced by the diner: the written tickets, the times printed by the register, and the shift relay board's pilot results. The cashier reprinted the disputed orders at Hannah's request and handed them to Elena. 7 showed that Elena had entered the correct changes before the plates were prepared. Raymond placed each ticket beneath the matching table box on the board. The object Dale had called a memory aid now became the map of the entire handoff. Hannah read the sequence aloud while facing Elena. Order received, change entered, no visible confirmation, incorrect plate returned. The same break appeared again and again. Dale opened the yellow incident pad to defend his decision. That only made the timing clearer. His recommendation to remove Elena from peak shifts had been written at 8:22, 8 minutes before one of the register entries he cited as justification. Dale said managers often prepared possible actions in advance. Raymond did not accuse him of lying. Then the result still depends on whether the missing process works, he said. Elena turned the board over. The numbers 19 corrections before/4 corrections after sat above Ruthbell's approval memo. She pointed to the 3 bright holes and then to the empty space where the rail belonged. Marty stepped out from the pass. He faced Elena first, not Raymond. I saw the rail on Dale's desk at 7:30, he said. Lana confirmed that the board had been mounted during the previous night's shift. Dale answered that he had removed it for review, not to target anyone. Hannah accepted the distinction. Intent is not what I need to decide tonight, she said. I need to know whether the diner can correct a failed handoff before 9:40. That left Dale one defensible position. Perhaps the original board, even fully restored, would still prove too slow. The truth had not yet won. It had merely narrowed the test. Elena gathered the 6 remaining open tickets and placed them in order. She assigned Marty to acknowledge receipt, Lana to mark cooking and ready, and herself to confirm each handoff. The riders returned to their seats. Raymond folded the placemat notes and set them aside. The diner's own timestamps were now enough. No one stared at Dale, but the empty rail space on the board seemed to point toward his office. He could continue arguing about authority, or he could bring back the missing part and let the process answer. At 9:25, Dale walked to the office door. He paused with one hand on the frame, looking at the board, the waiting plates, and the contract folder still open beside Hannah. Then he went inside. Would he return with another explanation, or with the piece that allowed Elena's work to be judged fairly? Dale returned carrying the metal rail and an envelope of red, yellow, and green tabs. He did not offer a speech. He set the hardware beside Elena and said, 2 screws are missing. Marty found replacements in the maintenance cup. Under Elena's direction, he and Dale mounted the rail above the pass. The repair took less than 2 minutes. At 9:28, Elena began the final run. Booth 6 requested no salt. Booth 9 changed one side dish. A counter customer moved a refill marker beside her cup instead of calling toward Elena's back. Marty placed red when he received each ticket. Lana moved the tab to yellow when cooking began and green only when the plate was ready. Elena confirmed every handoff with a visible sign. The diner remained busy, but the uncertainty stopped spreading. When Booth 9's support column blocked her view, the chrome napkin holder reflected the green tab exactly as it had during the test. 6 open orders crossed the pass without one correction. Hannah asked the cashier for the final count. 42 customers had been served. The disputed tickets showed Elena's instructions had been accurate. The 7 errors had occurred where changes were spoken but not confirmed. The board's earlier 12-shift record showed the same pattern in broader numbers. 19 corrections before the visual process for after it. At 9:36, Hannah placed the 6-month agreement on the counter. Allegheny Freight will contract with Maple Junction if this becomes the standard handoff process, not an accommodation used only when Elena is working. Elena read the sentence, then took the pen without signing. On a clean page, she wrote 3 conditions. Training hours paid separately, every employee trained, no order change valid without confirmation. Hannah agreed. Dale looked at the crossed-out Saturday schedule. He restored Elena's shift, voided the performance warning, and wrote that management had removed the approved board before dinner service. His action did not erase the evening, but it repaired the official record. At 9:38, Elena signed as the diner's paid shift communication trainer, and Hannah signed a contract. No collection was taken. No charity envelope appeared. The Copper Line riders paid their ordinary checks and left the tips Elena had earned. Before closing, Marty placed the first green tab for Booth 2, stepped into Elena's sight line, and raised 2 fingers. She answered with the same sign. By the next morning, the shift relay board was fixed permanently above the kitchen window. A small signal light covered the blind spot near Booth 9. Every shift began with Elena's 2-minute visual briefing, and every employee used the same 5 confirmations. Outside, Raymond's black Road King, edged with a thin copper line, rolled through the gray light after the rain. Inside, Elena pointed to booth 2. Marty, the counter staff, and Dale each answered visibly. No one shouted her name. The diner had not learned to speak less. It had learned that communication was unfinished until the other person could receive it. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more biker stories. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to real people, places, organizations, clubs, or events is purely coincidental.